You're watching Daybreak. Thank you for staying with us. The hashtag on X is Citizen Daybreak. The SMS code is 22422 at Citizen TV Kenya and at Ayub Abdikadir. Peter Opondo Kaluma is with us in studio, so as Dr. Hassan Kanenje and Dr. Duncan Ojwang and Ahmed Hashi, who is governance commentator. Yes, Dr. Kanenje, I was on you. Given the circumstances, we talked about the campaigns, but also the other underlying factors. How then is it going to be panning out, given the intricacies and one matter informing the other, and now proximity not regarded here, given what has happened at the White House, with so many interests across the African continent and historic elections that may otherwise also attract the attention of the world?
I think one thing you alluded to, Ayub, is especially the impact of the election of Donald Trump and the ability of, let's say, Raila Odinga's candidature to actually deliver the AUC commission. Now, I think when it comes to this particular issue, actually Odinga will probably be the best candidate, and here's why. Of the three candidates, he's the one who's been talking consistently about self-sufficiency and the need to actually move towards independence. Now, the former president, Uhuru Kenyatta, I think while addressing one of the functions, he wondered why people were crying, because he said, he's not your president, it's not your country, you don't pay taxes there. And this is actually a direction where we should be going. I do not understand why, for instance, the African Union's $600 million budget, most of it comes, from outside, when Kenya's budget is at $3 billion. As in, we can be able as a continent to move towards self-sufficiency. Because the moment you stop the baking bowl kind of politics and that type of dependency, you make yourself less vulnerable to the foreign machinations. Just by a stroke of a pen, USAID, disappears. Yeah. And you can see the amount of damage it has done, not just to Kenya, but to actually the African continent. And I think it's actually a wake-up call. And so moving towards self-sufficiency, trying to increase intra-African trade, for instance, which have been key points, are critical. This is the only continent that trades more with the outside than with itself. You can't grow like that. When you look at the Asia-Pacific, when you look at Europe, they actually trade more within themselves. And so when it comes to especially these specific aspects, with regard to Trump's vision of the world, of the three candidates, one actually is above the rest, and that is Raila Odinga. Now, another aspect that you have, and I'm not speaking this because I'm a Kenyan, but because of the practical aspects, even when we were campaigning for the Security Council seat, several years ago, some countries, especially some of the big powers that would like to manipulate the African continent, perhaps are going to be happier with, for instance, Djibouti winning. Yeah. Why? Because it's a little bit too small, 23,000 square kilometers, which is about a quarter the size of Turkana County, with 1 million people. And I have really no bad feelings about it. I love Djibouti very much. But generally, in terms of leverage, is very small. Kenya is 6th, 7th largest economy on the continent, both in terms of economy as well as in the size. Is the most influential diplomatic country, probably not just in sub-Saharan Africa, with regard to the way the world actually looks at it, sometimes in many aspects even ahead of South Africa and even Nigeria. Yeah. And so Kenya's candidature, while out there, it's going to be more respected because it's not very easily manipulable. That is part of the reason why, when you look at the campaign for the AUC seat, it was lots of chaos because the whole world was interested in it. But our new neighbor, who is now the AUC, or rather the Security Council, occupant, you realize it just when there was no noise. In fact, few people even know actually which African country is presenting. But when Kenya was there, and they made a huge impact. And so when it comes to what Africans expect, you see, they're going to be best placed to actually make their bet on Kenya. Yeah. Remember, this is not really Raila Odinga. This is Kenya. Yeah. This is how the world and the continent sees it. And so if we personalize it, then we actually lose the point, because anytime you're going for a continental or international body, it stops and ceases being personalized.
Thank you. Ahmed, just hang on that. Let's then flip the other side of the coin, Dr. Kanenje, and talk about Djibouti, its strategic relevance. I mean, its location in the Horn has provided America with strategic location with the provision of military personnel, equipment, including drone for reconnaissance mission across the region. China has, the Saudis have, the Indians have. I mean, how does then this rule out the question of the French here, a permanent member of the UN Security Council, very influential across the globe, given the circumstances back at home facing President Emmanuel Macron, who has lost the majority, and the political crisis with regards to the fading influence across the Western belt, how will then the French exert some influence here to have the Djibouti card go ahead and its influence? And how will the Americans view as well this, given that it has provided Americans with a strategic location to conduct military operations across the continent?
And that is why Djibouti, for instance, nice, beautiful country on the Red Sea, is a lot more strategic to foreigners than it is actually to the continent.
Yep.
You see. So if African leadership will vote with perhaps their stomachs, then they may consider that. But if going to vote with their heads in terms to build African agency, you want to vote for a country or a leader who may actually have some say and may not easily be manipulated. And again, this is not just because we're East Africans or we come from Kenya. When you look at power politics, that is how it works. Perception does matter and it holds sway. And so the countries that have bases in Djibouti, of course, may be interested perhaps in having a degree of influence because it's easily malleable, as opposed to, Kenya, where, and for those of us who experience, policymakers, internationally, it's very clear that there's a lot more interest in Kenya as actually a gateway to not just the larger Eastern Africa, but the larger greater, Horn of Africa region. And so those who may be perhaps swayed to vote on the other side will actually be trying to influence politics in a way that perhaps the continent does not have as much agency, and we may end up with another Moussa Faki too, which may not exactly be very pleasant. And I'm not saying he hasn't performed, but he may not have performed to the extent to which he would if he actually come from a more respectable country that has some muscle, both regionally as well as internationally.
And by the way, Ahmed, coming to you, Moussa Faki Mohammed was little known because the front runners were Ambassador Amina Mohamed and Abdullahi Bathily from Senegal. Then just imagine Moussa Faki Mohammed. Yes, Ahmed, you had a point. Your hand was up.
Ayub, I've said this before, that patriotism is the last refuge of a scoundrel. And I think that the Kenyan public deserves a nuanced and educated analysis of the situation. This is not a political party rabble-rousing, trying to get a seat in the Kenyan parliament or in the Kenyan state or things like this. This is the AU. Now, for personal issues, I've been a long-time aide to the Prime Minister. People call me son. My family saved his life, transported him to Uganda. He's a family friend. But I disagree with him. He's disagreed with other people. And I don't believe that this AU thing is a good fit for the old man. I think that he's...
Why so, given his vision?
Well, I mean, first of all,
he outlines Pan-Africanism, peaceful, democratic, and... Yes, Ahmed, peaceful and democratic, secure Africa, enhance intra-Africa trade, strategic partnership, the Lion of Africa moment he talked about. Why is he not the best fit for the job?
All those things are good. The man's history is secure. That's not a question. Many of us have spent our lives fighting for that vision. But the issue that we are talking about, and
Dr. sounds very bitter. What is the issue?
I'll hold him to account.
Can I just finish?
Can we have
so you don't make me drop
objective arguments?
So again, I go back to my point of having a nuanced debate and not a rabble-rousing debate. The fact of the matter is, in my opinion, that the fit is not good for him. I also think that there's domestic politics involved. And the old man has gone into a coalition with the current president. And there is a political plan to make sure that Mr. Odinga stays in the AU so that there is an open field here and much more room for the president to wiggle politically when the elections come. And Kenyans need to know about this kind of discourse. Secondly, I think that Mr. Odinga, there's no question what my learned friend on the right here said about his qualifications and who he is. Nobody is arguing on those points. What we are saying is that the international community and the African continent right now are going to stack themselves against the Kenyan candidate and vote against him because of certain reasons. And what's the first reason? We've talked about this before, that the African continent, unfortunately, in a very neo-colonial way, is structured in a way there is Lusophone, there is Anglophone, there is the cultural divides between faiths. I'll give you a little tweet in which the Permanent Secretary in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs spoke about, and Mr. Mokisa Kitui joined that debate when he said that the African continent and the states here are going to vote purely on the interests of states. This is a bizarre twist of something called rational choice theory in economic theory. So, my learned friend on the left knows so well. But that's not a fact. That's an important fact in making a decision in the African Union. However, there are certain cultural issues that are involved. There's a divide between North Africa, South Africa, Central Africa. There are political issues that are between the states. There are differences in vision. There are differences in religion. There are differences in history. All these things come up to cause a situation in which I believe, and in my opinion, that going to make our candidate not win this election. So it's not that I'm opposed to Mr. Odinga as a person, or I'm opposed to him as being a candidate of the AU. As a public intellectual, our responsibility is to speak in a way in which the Kenyan people can see alternative views. Mr. Kaluma has an alternative view. My learned friend on the left has an alternative view. This view says that because of those political economic issues, we are not going to get that position. That's all.
Yes, Raila promises to move Africa to multilateralism rather than bilateralism. Most of the agreements we sign are bilateral, and we don't get the economy of bargaining as a continent. And remember, cross the river together and the crocodile will not catch any of you. So there is the multilateralism vision that is very clear about that MP Opondo was talking about. I also think the place of Kenya as an anchor state and as a stabilizing effect. If you look at even what the US have done with Kenya, it's more strategic. You know, Kenya almost has a one UN stop, almost like New York. The digital diplomacy in Kenya, the human resource in Kenya. So the place of Kenya among nations is very high. The idea, even Trump, right now, they are not happy with South Africa because of the BRICS. And that makes Kenya the most favorite for them, because they are very afraid of the China influence peddled through South Africa, who are members of the BRICS. And therefore, you can see even the enhanced relationship with, between Kenya and the US. And therefore, I think the US will be in favor of Kenya. Now,
but how then? Because if you look at the second statement of, the second paragraph of the statement issued by Donald Trump on the sanctions on the Rainbow Nation was basically speaking about what he termed as targeting the white minority. Yet Donald Trump's government, the American government, provided weapons to Israel, for example, in destroying Gaza, and more weapons and bombs were dropped on Gaza than World War II combined. If you look at what happened in Hiroshima, Nagasaki, and also in Germany. Then how do you trust, for example, an administration where the head of state in America is so hawkish, dangerous, nativist, extreme, with his executive orders and what we had seen coming out of the White House since he had assumed office on the 20th of January?
You might be right, but under realist theory, the powerful get their way, the weak suffer what they must. And therefore, there is what we call the America...
Superpower will have his way.
There's what America is the superpower, not China. How many people are listening to China music? How many people are eating China food? We talk of KFC and all that and all that. That was your presentation. So there is the hegemony part. And therefore, there is what we call America exceptionalism.
Yes.
We know that it's a double standard, it's unfair, but it's the reality that some nations are powerful. But the innovation of Raila candidature is this. He's presented as the Eastern Africa candidate, not even Kenya. Because remember, at the initial stage of the launch, most of the East African presidents were there. And that is the different...
Kagame wasn't there.
Right, but
Somalia's Mahmoud wasn't there.
But with apology.
Sent representative.
And a number of them were there.
For Kagame. And the Prime Minister Somalia was there.
But look at that innovation, learning from Amina's challenges, that you can only go far if you present this candidate, not even as Kenya, but even move and present them as an East African Africa candidate. And then it favors that the president chairs the AU reform and chairs the East African community at this point. Now, if you look at what Djibouti can do, Djibouti is multi-aligned. Djibouti has bases for almost every superpower. And therefore, it's trusted by none. Literally, because it has not just one base.
It's not discrete.
No, it is prone to wander, Lord, I feel it, as we sing in our SDA church. And therefore, Djibouti, everyone knows, is up for everyone. And it has no masses to be in it. It literally has more than one base. In the Red Sea, it is the access for everyone. It is not as a force that someone can say, I have this one on my corner. And therefore, that leaves the Kenya shining diplomacy, including the peace diplomacy, on high demand. In the continent, in fact, in terms of diplomacy, geopolitics and geostrategy, you can rate us at top 2%. Beyond that, and therefore that's why I'm confident the US, knowing that China is trying to sneak through South Africa, will die with Kenya. And then finally...
But China exports more goods into the continent than America does.
It does, but you see, Kenya also have never severed link with China, you know, and that is the multi-aligned, the prong that we look at what we get from that country. We don't worship these alliances in a vacuum, so that if we get good medicine from India, on this one we work with India. You have seen this government trying to do things with Dubai, with Egypt, and therefore with even Israel to some extent. So to that extent, let me tell you the most sad experience that I had as I wrap up. When Obama stood for presidency, none other than Kenya president and foreign affairs minister supported McCain.
2008.
So there is a place for patriotism. There is a place that if we are dining at national and international table, let us stop our sectorialism and our village politics. Because what was so embarrassing, President Kibaki's father worked with Obama, senior, as economist. And then you come out and support, so to speak, a Caucasian from Kaukol Mountain, and you leave a son of your colleague. But guess what? Obama drove through. Now this time, history repeats itself.
And the assurance is...
This is the TB moment, my brother.
The assurance is now Odinga has the president's support. And it was unfortunate that the Kibaki government is supporting.
Isn't it interesting, by the way, that the idea of leaving no one behind, and you see some of even the anger I see is veiled under the idea of whether it's qualification, whether it's whatever. It is because there is an element of let us bring those who have been to the margin to the center, whether it's in terms of giving them ID, whether it's in terms of equal distribution of resources, development, and that comes out as anger, sealed in terms, because look at the Djibouti candidate and Raila. One have been in jail for 8 years fighting for human rights. One have scars to show for it. One have been prime minister. The guy have been paltry foreign affairs. But you are taking all this.
It's not a contest in Homa Bay.
No.
We're talking about the...
We know all about that. It's time to make his submissions. You have your time. And mind you, just as a point of pointer, and also Djibouti is more or less a dictatorship.
Yes. That's a really excellent point to make.
Democracy.
I'm happy you've made it. I always have a problem discussing any matter political with pseudo-academicians because they speak a lot of theories.
So why did you come here?
You listen to Ahmed.
Stay home.
It is theories. You listen to to Dr. Juang, he'll drop in a bit of practicality.
You'll have the right to reply. You'll have the right to reply.
We have not calling him a
hang on.
If we call him a pseudo MP.
Hang on.
We're just
a pseudo academic.
No, then you're a pseudo MP.
Yeah, so keep quiet.
Oh, you keep quiet. You're insulting.
Yes, make your point.
So I'm telling you, there is a difference between politics. Is this how you debate with this?
No, just give your points, but don't insult people. It's pathetic to do that on national TV. Just give it.
Let's have some order. Let him make his point here.
Yes, he will withdraw that. I wanted to say, I will not lose my temper today.
Yeah.
Yes, but what is the problem with this gentleman?
Okay, go ahead.
Ahmed, can you have some order?
All right.
Yes. Please proceed.
A time must come in Africa, and a time must come in Kenya when we look at issues internally. We are discussing the thinking and the interest of foreign nations over this election. When will we start discussing our interest as Africa? And that, to me, is the most important thing. How can it be that we created the African Union Commission to be a continental body to leverage Africa? But when we are going to elect a person to chair that commission, when our thinking should be, how do we bring a person who can bring all African head of states with the clout, with the experience, with the knowledge of Africa? We start thinking of what is Macron thinking, what would Trump do, what would this do? I wanted to request that is not the way to go about it. How can we be going for election of African Union and we are thinking of who colonized us, who colonized which party? We should think of how do we push Africa forward and how do we have a meaningful continental body, and therefore which of these candidates gives us the best option in terms of achieving it. Let me tell you, Ayub, we may talk of the geopolitical, geo-economic location of Djibouti, but really, unless you understand well the geopolitics of the world, you cannot compare Kenya to Djibouti in terms of location, in terms of diplomatic leverage. These things you are talking about, military, locations, I don't know how we are forgetting how many bases of all those, foreign powers are in Kenya. We have America in Kenya. We have UK in Kenya. So, we have all these agencies in Kenya. This is the only country.
Just
don't interrupt.
On an information note,
yes.
you can't rule out geopolitics out of it. That's why America has more than 720 military bases across the world. I'm on geopolitics. Yes. I hope you are following me. Yes, please. I'm saying you must be alive to geopolitics. And on that comparison, are you getting me? You cannot compare Kenya to Djibouti in terms of location, in terms of the foreign influences around, in terms of the interest in Kenya, in terms of the democratic space and the voice Kenya has as a calming nation, not just within Africa, but across the world. Kenya is big. I mean, you cannot sit on a table like this if you really know and start saying, in terms of, these considerations, Djibouti would be above Kenya. And that is why I'm calling Ayub. Yeah. That we cannot be going for elections in terms of, the AU. Yes. And we are there seated saying, which religion do we practice as Africans? Then why do we have AU? Who colonized Kenya? Who colonized Djibouti? Then why do we have AU? We are looking at AU as an organization for the entire Africa. And that is why I'm confident myself that if you look at, all these candidates, the three of them, it is not, a choice to be made. It is a choice between the obvious and the one we are gambling with. Yeah. Raila is a Pan-Africanist. And that, even the Djibouti people will tell you, Raila is a leader who has stood for something which is beyond Kenya, but is known across the world. In terms of the matters you are discussing, if you asked even, President Trump, yes, what do you think of Raila? He'll tell you something about, Raila, not Yusuf. And in my view, this is the leader we need for the African Union Commission now. A person who is going there with the clout, with the leadership, platform and level that can marshal the African heads of states, and that can voice the concerns of Africa in a manner that the world will attend to it. And you remember I started by saying, how come it is the first time
the debate about who becomes the AU commission is this, exciteful across the world. We may take it lightly here, my brother Ahmed. But personally, I'm very concerned when Kenyans, become, unpatriotic and Kenyans bring small internal things on a matter that is continental. Ayub, let me tell you, there is a time in 2008 when we were in the midst of post-election violence. Remember, we were in some hotel in Kilimani. And there was athletics going out of the country. And then we see Pamela Gilimo. Do you know in the hotel, Kenyans from different ethnicities were held on their table sitting. But when Gelimo broke and was winning, everybody found themselves cheering. And I remember we went embracing and asking, what are we fighting over? Okay. This is a moment like that for the people of Kenya, for the people of East Africa, for Africans who believe in the best for Africa, not pandering to foreign powers. Right. And that explains my disappointment. Yes. When you see people who give you the idea they are academics, hiding their better positions against Raila to spew, hatred. I'm not talking of Ahmed. Don't worry about Ahmed. Okay. I have no. But you've seen articles. Yes. You've seen articles, Ahmed, from people. You go to tweet Ahmed, and you get some Kenyans from just a community within Kenya running something. Raila must fall. But a single community. You just post a photo of Raila, and you see people from a single community saying Raila should not get it. That is wrong. I'm saying, Ayub, that's wrong. A time comes when, as Kenyans, let us give our best to serve Africa and the world.
Thank you. Your point made. But also to make sure that... also to make it clear that this is not a discussion about communities. Yes, but, it's not. No. I'm telling you what is happening on space. A substantial this is a substantial space to discuss issues and substantively discuss how we can... nothing to do with the broad government. Ahmed, I'm going to mute your microphone. So, as the Speaker does at the floor of the National Assembly. Yes, Dr. Kanenje, internally we have seen a lot of development, especially opposition towards Raila, support for him in equal measure since his support and the subsequent coming into life of the broad-based arrangement. Is that also having a bearing, given the voices Kenyans have expressed online, as Honorable Kaluma had pointed out?
It's voice of a community, no?
Oh, come on, Kaluma, wait.
I'm going to mute your mic like the Speaker does at the National Assembly. And Ahmed too. Okay. So let's have some order.
Well, I'm glad I'm sitting behind these two warriors, so we don't have an all-out war like in the DRC. Now, does this have a bearing? Well, from perhaps the people who pay attention to social media, they may start wondering, of course, what is happening in Kenya. Okay, and Dr. Ojwang, mentioned something about 2008 and how embarrassing it was, and it wasn't just from the leadership. Actually, some Kenyans in the United States voted for John McCain, as a result. I played a role in the Obama for America campaign in 2007 to 2008, so I'm very, familiar with that. And, one thing that needs to be understood is, first of all, you cannot run for a continental or international seat without the support of your country at the presidency. You cannot even start actually to do that. So whether this is out of convenience or whatever, that is just the reality. You must be endorsed by your country, and there must be messaging that shows actually your country supports you, and probably your region supports you too. I think the challenge we have generally as in Kenya is we make a lot of noise and we externalize, our local differences in ways that perhaps is not exactly helpful. Now, Kaluma, this is not being pseudo-academic. Okay. Yes. No, you are an academic. You are not pseudo yourself.
Yes. Yeah. Okay. Yes. But, and he's also not pseudo. Yeah, okay. I'm the only one who's pseudo.
But ultimately, it's assembly. When they'll be sitting, I think they're going to be driven by their national interests and how they perceive what each candidate, meaning which country, is going to be best placed to represent their interests. It is true that you can never rule out the role of geopolitics, in these matters. But I think increasingly also, a lot of Africans are realizing they are on their own, because even those old allies are no longer as dependable as they used to be. And I'm glad Donald Trump actually came onto stage, because he has communicated a message that now some European countries are also following suit. You understand? With regard to being very inward-looking, we're struggling here in Somalia to get money for the new mission. And part of it, it speaks to the fact of what Raila's candidature has actually been communicating, that we need to build agency and independence. Now, if his messaging, especially at this time, can now resonate with Africans, that perhaps we need to start approaching how to run the continent differently, then most likely, then the Assembly is going to actually do what they must do, meaning they may have to go with this candidate. Yes, there have been reservations about the candidate's age. There have been reservations about, Nemit's ability to be a CEO. And you can't dismiss that. But remember, 2 years ago, we were about to elect him as president of Kenya also. Not that Donald Trump is much younger than actually Raila Odinga anyway. And because of the structure of the AUC, the agenda, once it is clear, it can be implemented by the committee, the secretariat. And so that is not exactly something very big. However, I think some of the chatter that, of course, is going to come from here doesn't create a very good impression with regard to the candidature of Raila Odinga. But ultimately, I believe the member states are actually going to determine that, and perhaps they may be less swayed with the keyboard warriors and more swayed by strategic national interests of their countries and where they see the region and the continent going.
Yes, Ahmed.
The totalitarian mindset of this broad-based government has made its arguments here. And I think that it's very important for us to say that fervor is the best weapon of impotence. The main issue that we're talking about here today, Ayub, that you invited us for, was the election of the next chairperson of the African Union. And of course, as Kenyans, there is a fundamental denial of truth. The majority of Kenyans, outside, inside, online, and in the popular imagination of this country, are furious with Mr. Odinga and pray that he does not win that.
And election. Kenya only has one vote, and that vote lies.
Kenya has only one vote. So
with the president who has said he will vote for him.
So what is the use?
Let me just make my
is that not
I'll let you and then you will reply.
Okay, yes, Ahmed.
So I'm saying that
is the point that you have picked on not inconsequential then? Because the only vote will go to Odinga, and we know that it's the president who says so.
But I'm saying, where do the arguments, and nothing has been done without a theory. Okay. Just making a practical vote in a ballot box is informed by ideology, ethnicity, faith, a broad experience of a person. Mr. Kaluma is talking about the African personality. He went to campaign for Trump. Ask him, he's right here. He went to the United States to campaign for Donald Trump.
Yes,
I don't think that he should try and, hypothesize for us that the African personality is something that is defending. Trump has called Africa very bad names. Very bad names. So I think that contradiction should not be brought to the table. The second thing is...
Just hang on, as you proceed. Honorable Peter Kaluma, you campaigned for Donald Trump?
Yes.
I campaigned for Trump. And what I want him to of course, understand
you'll continue.
Is the context of what we are discussing.
No context.
That ultimately, the states will vote according to their interests. I campaigned for Trump, and I can tell you, I had my own interests. And those interests, keep quiet, Ahmed, because you said so.
Yeah.
You know what my position has been on matters LGBTQ and matters family protection. And I don't deem it appropriate that, the candidate who was running against Trump would, help us, stop the surge. And that position was even before. I don't know whether Ahmed supports LGBTQ.
No, I don't.
And I'm very pleased that though we have a problem with Trump on some issues, which I think we could address interstate bilaterally or multilaterally, the LGBTQ thing is the first thing he signed, and the executive order against. And I'm very happy about that.
I wonder how an intellectual of your caliber who is looked up to by law students in Kenya and abroad because of your writings, supported a man who knows so little about anything.
I'm shocked at what you're saying, Ayub.
Yeah, because you said there are some things you said that can be reformed about Donald Trump. How then do you reform someone who believes that wind turbines can cause cancer? He thinks that he can stop hurricane with a nuclear weapon. He thought Finland was part of Russia and thought England and Great Britain are the same thing.
Let us not debate Trump. You will not succeed against me.
The point is,
let me tell you.
Because look, if you look at hawkish.
Do you want to give me time to respond, or you want us to debate Trump with you?
Okay, so
create a day we debate Trump. Let us talk about Raila.
We were talking about a substantial issue which has an effect.
No.
So, Honorable Kaluma, let's have some order. Ahmed, hang on. I ask you the questions, you respond to my questions. So, with respect, let's stick to that arrangement.
So, you ask, then you keep quiet.
Yeah, and you respond on time.
Yes, correct.
Give me the answers that I want. Then I ask you the question, how then do you reform someone who hawkish Republicans, including senior ambassadors, career Republicans like Ambassador John Bolton, have concerns about because of his deception, because of his dangerous, they say, this crazy nativist extreme who thinks that he can stop hurricane with nuclear weapons.
Who voted for Trump?
It's the Americans.
Correct.
I'm asking why you supported that man.
Correct. I'm supporting him because of what the Americans saw in him to vote for him. He's fighting for America first. He has the American agenda as a leader of America. Your problem is that you are thinking Trump should be your president.
No, he isn't.
It's not.
I'm just pointing out.
And so, like all human beings, Ayuba, Trump has some very many good things. And I sympathize with people who think Trump does not know what he's doing. The guy is a guy who has succeeded in everything he promised during campaigns.
For example?
On the first day.
Tell me.
I've told you LGBTQ.
Tell me other things.
He has done it. He said there will be no, reckless migrations through the South.
Okay.
It has stopped.
And he lied about... Honorable Kaluma, you made your point.
No, I don't know whether he lied.
So let me just point
Create a debate for that. What I'm telling you is that in terms of campaign, you support who stands with the ideals.
To just give you a reminder, because it's not a debate about him, but he certainly has an influence because he runs the great superpower. But he lied about the Mexico wall. He wanted to deny Americans birthright citizenship, and federal judges...
We are debating about Raila. Can we debate it? And AUC.
You just diverted away from him.
No, you're the one diverting. And I'm asking you to be focused back to what brought us here.
Okay, the reason I brought that issue is because Mr. Kaluma brought the argument about Africans supporting issues that are nativist to us, and for us to be Pan-Africanist and to be patriotic. And my response is that the patriotism is the last refuge of a scoundrel. You can't put together this support for Donald Trump and at the same time be a Pan-Africanist, have the ability to support African nations. It's a contradiction, and it needs to be put out there as a debate.
I don't understand this argument.
I've kept quiet. Let me finish my point.
Can we go back to AU?
So that's the why I brought up that issue. So the thing about this one is now, as far as the Kenyan state is concerned, as I said, the PS for Foreign Affairs is, you see, the argument of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs was a singularity, that it is the state which has interests alone, and in that way we can help put Mr. Odinga into that seat. I think that was a strategic mistake. I think that, for an example, there are very important issues that we would have connected with the North Africans, for an example. Algeria had a national liberation struggle to fight against the French in Algeria. Kenya had the same thing. If we had adroit people who knew how to deal with the issues of how to connect to states apart from interests which are just as important as other issues, then I think that our chances would have been bigger, would have been greater, would have been more adroit. What has happened is that, and a clear example is the president actually going to visit Egypt, meeting President El-Sisi, having a private time with him and the former prime minister. And immediately, 24 hours after that fact, the Egyptian state supported the candidacy of Djibouti because of our relationship with Ethiopia. Ethiopia and Kenya, have had a very long-standing relationship, a military pact since the 1960s. Egypt and Ethiopia have a big problem over the Nile waters. The second thing is that today, Ethiopia itself is 50-50, if not wishy-washy, about Kenya's candidacy. I put my point on what is happening in the DRC. I have brought up and said that Trump has got a spat with the South Africans. The South Africans, that one of the foreign ministers of South Africa is married to a person from Luo Nyanza. Sisuli, right? So the South Africans and ODM have had a great relationship. In fact, when we were making the ODM with my senior, Mr. Nyong'o, some of the things we did was that we patented it over the ANC, the African National Congress. So my point is that I think that the thrust and the way in which we approach this thing was flawed from the beginning, and I could see that this candidature was going to fail. And that's my position. It's not against Mr. Raila. Yes. It's against what is going on in Africa and in the world.
Yes, Dr. Ojwang, just yes, Peter Pondo, you are right of reply to that.
It is unfortunate, Ayub, we come to discuss our chances as a country in the AU contest. And we are talking about why we should not have a chance. I have a problem with that. Could we, discuss the issue of AUC? Ayub, when you see me talk as I do, sometimes, accept it, I may be having more information than most people have. And I know that is the reason as to why, you called me, because I could have some information. Let me tell you, Ayub, in a campaign like this, I can tell you even the Djibouti guy and country have agents in Kenya. And I can tell you those agents campaigning for him while pretending they're talking other issues are everywhere in the media, including on this front.
What I wanted to say... Is it an allegation that you can prove?
Yeah.
I know. You have 3 guests on
I can tell you. Yeah, so let me... Okay. I've not mentioned you. Why are you profiling yourself?
That's a profound statement.
No, you don't cut me.
Can you prove it?
Don't cut me.
But can you prove your allegation?
There is a reason, Ayub.
You said...
Now keep quiet, I prove it then.
What are you saying? Ayub is an agent.
Go ahead, yeah.
Ayub, you are also turning hostile.
No, I'm just being...
Yeah. So when you ask a question, let me respond to you.
Because you're making profound allegations.
From a month ago,
yes.
I'm responding. Don't intervene.
Yes, please.
From a month ago, Ayub, and I'm telling you this from information, the Djibouti candidate in their strategy picked a few prominent people, picked bloggers with influences of over 1 million. You remember, like the South African lady. Picked people who appear in the various media to campaign Raila, okay? And to talk about how Raila cannot get this thing. And this thing was to be on the social media platform. It was to be on the mainstream media. I can tell you the scheme in Kenya was to portray the country as unstable, the person supporting Raila as somebody who is not even respected as a president, and Raila as a person rejected by his country, and Raila's party as shaky. So you've seen for the last 1 month, Abdikadir and Ayub, you'll see the main news item of all media, not just in Kenya. It's about ODM is divided, broad-based government, root or negative this, and it has been going. So I may not say much here, but I'm not surprised that as a Kenyan we can stick our neck and say Raila should not get it or Raila cannot get it. Let us talk about the issues around the election, what may be considered, and our prayer as a country for Raila, and we leave it at that.
Okay. Yeah. And we talked about the elections, the composition, the principles, the rotation, and the regions to produce who, the deputy, the chairperson, and the central, southern, western, which are supposed to be producing the commissioners. So at length, we have talked about what brought us here, Honorable Peter.
Yes, thank you.
Dr. Ojwang, one major point for Africa will be then how to reset its agriculture, education, and governance. Certainly, we have seen the wave of changes across the world. Yeah. Trump back in the White House, you have seen fascism in Europe, Hungary, Italy, Matteo Salvini. Also, the Reform Party in the UK of Nigel Farage is gaining momentum, adding a third layer to the traditional Conservative and the Labour parties. How should then whoever wins this election be prioritizing Africa's agenda in business, in healthcare, and in education?
Thank you. That's a great question. And that's why I was saying this is a time for whether it is rebirth, rebaptism for the continent. That there is so much going on in the world that the person who should rise to that position should be someone who can scan the many factors, leverage on their experience to chart way forward by using their charisma to pull everyone behind them. And so to speak, I think on that fact, we are on board that Raila easily have access to other head of states because of collegiality and camaraderie that he enjoys. The world is shrinking in terms of what it is giving out. Even as we talk of the power of the West and all that, it is shrinking, it's declining. Right now, the foreign aid, foreign investment we get is less than diaspora remittance in Kenya. And that is sobering. That we are seeing, yes, a lot of geopolitics, geointerest, but we are also seeing Africa renaissance or reemergence. If now our diaspora remit more money back home than the international investor, the so-called international investor, it shows you that the thing is more nuanced than probably what we are used to of when America cough, everyone catch a cold and all that. But number two, you know, there is a saying in Swahili, adui muombe njaa. Don't struggle so much with your enemy. Just pray they starve, then you can do whatever you want with them. That is what has been happening in the county, in the country. That's what has been happening with Africa. And as Prime Minister will put, it's the paradox of plenty. We are talking of the curse of minerals. We are talking of the curse of having a rebel land, yet our people are starving in between. It's like the tale of dark city where it's a contradiction. You have so much, but you have less. What has been lacking is governance. It's a leader who can bring us with charisma to speak with one voice and move from bilateral to multilateral. And with that, you can see what Raila have been articulating, even in terms of connecting Africa in terms of infrastructure, those roads that will make sure we trade more with each other. You can see things like the collegiality enjoys among the other nations. It is time for Africa to realize that even in terms of donation and people giving and charity, it is shrinking. The world economy is shrinking, and as it shrinks, people are holding on their dollars everywhere. There is less money to throw around, and that could be a challenge, but it's also a big opportunity for Africa to rethink self-sufficiency, to rethink on how to cut their clothes according to their size, and to re-emerge stronger, so that if we are talking of AU that was built by China, what a shame. And that is the embarrassing thing, that you are here and every time, a big donation by China, every time we are here, even to get there, we are funded by donors. So to what extent are we free? And the Raila's plan to fund AU by the member states and to consider any finance out of it, so that you have to keep the influence of those other people out there. Yeah. And so I'm very optimistic that this is the time for Africa. Raila have lived the soul and the heart of Pan-Africanism, the experience. And to me, this is where you need the charisma.
Okay. Dr. Kanenje, one thing that we can't rule out that is a factor and a constantly developing story is the crisis in Eastern Democratic Republic of the Congo. We had seen the joint SADC and EAC summit co-chaired by Emerson Mnangagwa and President William Ruto, respectively. Are they going into this election, or are they going or heading to Addis as a solid two-block voice, or has the DRC crisis broken the bond?
Good question.
I think that is a very important question, to ask. Of course, that may have some impact. However, I think to the extent that SADC is talking to EAC is recognition that SADC and Samidrek mission actually failed, many of which a lot of us had predicted. And so they're actually looking to the EAC, to provide some kind of leadership. And here's the reason why. When the East African Regional Force on Eastern DRC, led by Kenya, they made a lot of success without actually firing a single bullet. M23 had pulled in most of those towns. They were creating conditions were supposed to be conducive for political solution, for negotiations. Samidrek came in chest thumping. Fighting on the side of President Tshisekedi against M23. That completely eliminated the possibility of actually having peace in Eastern DRC, in part because Samidrek do not understand Eastern DRC. The way, for instance, the East African contingent, which also speaks Swahili, by the way, like most people in Eastern DRC, which have a better understanding than the Samidrek. And so, to the extent that they may be actually looking at East Africa to provide some kind of direction, I think works in favor of the Kenyan candidate, as opposed to the other way around. Of course, Tshisekedi may not be happy with certain things, but part of it is attributed to some of the misperceptions among the leaderships, themselves. But I think South Africa, most of those countries in Southern Africa, are probably likely going to actually end up voting for this candidate. There was another point that was raised. It is true that when it comes to strategic, things, you don't exactly look at some of the cultural or religious things. Now, that is the ideal, what ought to be, but there is what is. Now, to the extent that North Africa, for instance, they are looking at providing a candidate who most likely is going to be a Muslim.
The deputy chairperson.
For deputy. Is really going to be a very, very hard case to actually have, and I'm not trying to be biased, to have two Muslim CEOs, running the
There's the cultural angle.
And so to have Yusuf and then have some Arab.
That's not allowed. Can't have that.
Exactly. And even for that factor alone, is going to make a lot of leaders actually say, you know what, we can't do it. It doesn't look good. But while it is not illegal.
It's a possibility.
Well, it's not illegal. It just does not look good, and so that, of course, works in favor of Kenya.
Yes, I'll come to you. Honorable Peter Opondo, how will then the last-minute lobby be of help here? Because the last time when President Kenyatta was there for Ambassador Amina Mohamed, we nearly opened the champagne before Uganda, for example, as mentioned here, had made a last-minute decision. President Yoweri Kaguta Museveni was there. How key will be the last-minute lobby headed in this context by the president, and lawmakers will be traveling to Addis?
Lawmakers have no role in this thing, I think. They just, they just want to see and witness what is happening and accept their excitement, those who are going. I can tell you, Ayub, were Raila to win, as we pray he does, Kenya will erupt in joy. And we'll be back here to discuss it if it were to happen. Were the heads of state of Africa to give Raila the honor, and it were to be announced, Ayub, that Raila is returning as the chairperson of the African Union Commission, you will see traffic to the airport to receive him. So despite our pretended disagreements, I can tell you we are very patriotic, and it will manifest. The last stage of these campaigns will be determined, in my view, by two things. Number one, the relationship the candidates have with the people who are going to vote as any campaign. And I believe Prime Minister Raila Odinga has advantage on this. We can talk of regional blocks and others, but you will know the history of Raila with somebody like Cyril Ramaphosa. Even when in the context of regional blocks they speak, there is that personal talk they can have. We can have the situation of, DRC, but you know how Raila relates with both, Kagame at a person and Tshisekedi at a person. So the relationship interpersonal relationship between Raila and these candidates, and of course the candidates and the various heads of state, is going to be a consideration. Two will be the place of the individual state from where the candidates come, and how those states, face into the interest of the individual states in Africa. But thirdly, ultimately, these are leaders in Africa, and I know they also want to look at the candidate they can easily work with at the level of the AUC, chairperson, not a person who is, implementing. And I think if they were to be considered that way, then we are on good foothold and our prayers may yield.
Thank you. Final comment. I want to sample the feedback.
Abdi, Arais Mohammed and Ahmed Khalif, fierce Republicans from the desert, have spoken their mind and have contributed to the struggles of the freedom of this country. Mr. Hashi is a talisman in that area. I am in that tradition. I think one thing we should be very careful about is kind of labeling and sloganeering. Well, the Kenyan public expects a nuanced and educated debate about the issues so that they can become informed. Nobody in this panel is has any kind of angst against our Prime Minister. That's not it. If there's any person who has been closer to him in this world, it's me. But the point of the matter is, when we're talking about international relations, we're talking about diplomacy, we're talking about African state politics, the public deserves a educated assessment, and I think that anything else would be called appalling. And I think that we should censure the Member of Parliament for Homo Bay for his language, and next time he comes here...
Are you busy really inviting me again?
We are let's get to see what the Kenyan public are saying on X, and so that we wrap things up here on the broadcast. The hashtag is Citizen Daybreak, and here is what you are saying shortly coming up on your screens with sample, but a few of the minutes that you have sent in. Engineer Lazaro says Kenya approached this particular election with a lesson of previous failures in mind. This time round, President William Ruto has done everything within his jurisdictions to marshal East African vote into one basket. Talai_Kilel says Raila Odinga's candidacy for the AUC chairmanship is an exciting prospect. His focus on fostering Pan-Africanism and tackling regional issues makes him a promising candidate for the role. Sir Nixon Dugure says, I hope Honorable Raila Odinga will focus much on African countries, that he will not be tempted to favor Kenya too much over the other members. All the best, he says, Baba. Babu Michael says, the truth is that Raila's candidature at the AUC this time makes Kenya very close to clinching this seat. The campaign has been vigorous and very objective across the continent. I think and hope that this seat is for Raila and Kenya at large. Remy Bute says the remarkable life and exemplary career experiences of Right Honorable Raila Odinga makes him a perfect fit to sit at the helm of the AUC to drive Africa's transformation and Agenda 2063. Frank Orinde says Raila Odinga's bid for AUC chair is a game changer for Kenya and Africa. His leadership, Pan-African vision and global diplomacy makes him the best candidate to drive Africa's unity, economic growth and global influence. Peter Gesura says the AUC bid is a big battle between Raila Odinga and Mahmoud Ali. Let us be hopeful that our own will carry the day. J.M. Musoma says, tell Kaluma that Kenyans, Gen Zs and the millennials campaign against Raila Odinga's candidature because he betrayed them when they needed him most, when they caused a revolution and forced the president to heed their calls. ODM opportunistically used the chance to cut the deals within KK. Well, I think we can discuss that some other day. And
that one, bring Kaluma and I'll be here.
No problem. We can have this.
Only the two of us.
And well, we can do a good date.
It would be a very good
we discussed because Honorable Peter Kaluma, the last time he was with the president at a church service in Washington,
we saw him here.
He said, Hatutoki.
Hatutoki.
No, Abdikari, the last time we were with the president in Oma Bay Town on 27th December.
Okay, yeah.
You remember when he was doing press-ups?
And
I was the host.
Yeah.
So that was the last time.
And he played.
and he scored a goal.
Anyway, thank you very much.
I appreciate your time. Just maintain your positions. Dr. Duncan Ojuang, thank you so much. You'll be off to Addis tomorrow.
Yeah. Good luck, Duncan.
And safe flight. Ahmed Haji, thank you for your time. Dr. Hassan Kanenja, thank you. Honorable Peter Opondo Kaluma, thank you. We look forward to having you here on the broadcast again some other time. Thanks to you too for working up with us on the broadcast. The hashtag on X, as ever, has been Citizen Daybreak. The SMS code is 22422. At Citizen TV Kenya, and at Ayub Abdikadir. Many thanks for your time. Up next is Health and Lifestyle with Safina Chiengoma. Good morning.